The countdown to the NBA trade deadline is just under a week away, and there continues to be more and more smoke about the direction the Sixers are looking to go. One name that continues circling back and continues to be more smoke connecting them is Kyle Lowry. We all saw him get dealt from the Heat to the Charlotte Hornets last week, and reports continue to indicate that he's either an option to be retraded or a buyout candidate in which Philadelphia is a likely spot for him to land on his feet. In this video, I want to break down the latest reports on Lowry specifically, tying him to Philadelphia, as well as giving my thoughts on the subject and why I think I disagree with Daryl Morey on another standpoint here. So to kick things off, I want to begin with this Jake Fisher article here and the latest report on things. So Jake Fisher's latest write-up at Yahoo was titled, "How the Terry Rozier Trade Has Reset the Point Guard Market." Kyle Lowry, of course, being the piece from the Miami Heat that was traded in that deal. And Fisher writes, quote, "Lowry being dealt to Charlotte adds another name to the field of backcourt players available. He's a potential retrade candidate for the Hornets," sources said, but also is a potential player on the buyout market should Charlotte not find a deal for the veteran floor general. At that point, one destination that currently appears a real possibility, Philadelphia, where the Sixers stand as one of the few contenders below that first luxury tax apron and capable of signing a player who was bought out from a contract price pricier than this year's mid-level exception, which was $12.4 million. Lowry is not expected to join the Hornets prior to the trade deadline, league sources told Yahoo Sports, and will likely remain away from the franchise while the future of the respected 18-year veteran gets resolved. Fisher goes on to mention that, quote, "New York, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia have all been mentioned by league personnel as interested in finding your point guard reinforcements." So a lot to digest there. For starters, the biggest thing is there is no chance that Kyle Lowry will be playing for the Charlotte Hornets, who currently control his contractual rights. What that means is he will be remaining away from the team and looking for a new destination, whether that be through the trade market or as a buyout candidate. So obviously for the Hornets, the preference would be to deal Kyle Lowry, but it's not the easiest task in the world. That even when that Terry Rozier trade, the prize at this point is very clearly the draft capital, not Kyle Lowry at this version of himself. While I have a great deal of respect for Kyle Lowry throughout his career, he's obviously a champion, a guy that's been an all-star, a guy that's played at an incredibly high level, and a guy that is a Philadelphia native. I think the best days of him are far in his rear view. That I don't think at this point the 37-year-old version of Kyle Lowry is the type of piece that uplifts this Sixers team to a championship contender. Now, my concern with this being, and you can circle back to another video that was titled "Daryl Morey is Wrong" about this that I had, is just a disagreement in the mindset by Daryl Morey. Yes, Kyle Lowry is not going to cost as much on the open market, particularly if he's a buyout candidate. That number coming in roughly around $1 million for the rest of the season, which is a bargain price for what he brings to your table theoretically. But it also is that price point because he does not help your team that much at this point in his career. And to kind of touch on some of the price points of some other players around the league, I did want to drop this report here. Quote, "At least a first-round pick has thus been described as the necessary compensation for the Washington Wizards to part with table setter Tyus Jones," league sources told Yahoo Sports. The same goes for Portland to move on from guard Malcolm Brogdon, and Toronto with the recently acquired Bruce Brown Jr. The Hawks, sources said, are searching for 2 first-round picks and a starting-caliber player to part with DeJounte Murray, considered the premium lead guard option on the trade block. Zach LaVine, another name to bring into the mix there. His contract, of course, as intimidating as it is a huge factor as well. But what that brings me to believe is that Daryl Morey does not believe any of these players are worth the price point that they are being marketed as. Now, I disagree with that completely. That I do think when you have a team that is built the way this Sixers team currently is, that when you have a player playing the level that Joel Embiid has this season, a blossoming guard like Tyrese Maxey, and then as great as the East is and as many talented teams as there are, it's not impenetrable. That this is not the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant that you have to go through. The Celtics are beatable. The Bucks are beatable. The Cleveland Cavs, the New York Knicks, the Indiana Pacers, the Miami Heat, do those teams carry you that much to the point where you're not willing to put your chips in the middle and try and win a championship this year? Because it should not. And that's where I think the mindset of Morey is. And to lead into that a little more, we have this report from Zach Lowe here, which states, quote, "The Sixers are light on ball handling beyond Maxey and Embiid and have 3 first-round picks to trade ahead of this deadline. They are also sitting on max cap space for this summer, well aware that Paul George has not yet signed an extension with the Clippers. The Sixers could have their cake and eat it too by acquiring 1 or 2 good rotation players on either smaller salaries or expiring deals, upgrading their current team without compromising cap space. If that proves the best option, something like the theoretical combination of Bruce Brown and DeMar DeRozan, both potential rentals, then so be it. If the decision becomes more either or, now or later, the Sixers need to lean towards prioritizing this magical Embiid season. Now, that point that he hit to the end there is especially important to me, that I am with it with Zach Lowe, that you have to go all in this year, that as much as Joel Embiid is this elite talent, one of the greatest scorers of all times, and having a historic season right in front of us, this may never be replicable again. That you might flash forward to next year and he does not look like the same player. And as he deals with his knee injury, and who knows exactly what the extent of it is, it doesn't seem to be something that will be holding him out long term, as much as it was frustrating the whole events leading up to that Nuggets game. But the lingering knee issues are a legitimate factor. That we know with his track record of injuries that there is this off chance where one wrong step or one wrong fall and the entire picture of Joel Embiid's future changes in a major deal. That changes the Sixers championship outlook completely, and that is why you have to strike with the iron is hot, as is the situation right now. So when we get back to Kyle Lowry, that feels like a nice middling piece for bringing in a win-now piece without sacrificing your future. That bringing him in as a buyout candidate to play out the remainder of the season does not limit you in the future whatsoever. But I disagree with having to wait to that future. And for the Paul George name throw-in, I frankly just don't think it's realistic. That Paul George is from LA, he's playing in his hometown, and while it's clear that they prioritize giving Kawhi Leonard the extension, as the ink has touched paper already on that one, there's a lot of mouths to feed over there with James Harden. Who knows what the future of Russell Westbrook is, and even looking beyond that there are players worth paying attention to. But for Paul George specifically, he does not seem in a rush to be leaving LA. That he tried really hard to get there, dating back to his Pacers day, obviously had that pit stop in Oklahoma City, and eventually ended up in Los Angeles. I don't see him wanting to leave there, and that's especially the case when he is involved in the media space to an extent with his podcast, all those things. To me, I honestly think it's more likely that Paul George takes a little bit of a pay cut to remain in Los Angeles rather than seeking this long-term maximum contract deal in the way that some players are. I think Paul George is past that as time his career. When you look beyond that in the free agent market, there's not a lot of names that are that appealing either. That we have the James Hardens, Tobias Harris, LeBron James, maybe if there's an opt-out situation there, but it's not this stellar free agent list that they should be waiting around for. And once again, I continue to circle back to the concept of the Sixers being close enough this year that you have to go for it. You have to give yourself at least a fighting chance of it. And I just don't think Kyle Lowry is the needle mover that he is perceived to be in that case. Once again, I have a ton of respect for Kyle Lowry. To pull up his stats here, he is a champion, a guy that has been an all-star several times in his career, but he's just not that player anymore. That throughout his career, averaging 14.4 points per game, 6.2 assists, 4.3 rebounds, 1.3 steals. But looking at this season in particular, at age 37, averaging just 8.2 points, 4.0 assists, 3.5 rebounds. As far as the three-point percentage as a whole, shooting 38.5% from beyond the arc on 4.4 attempts per game. That is slightly above his career average of 36.8%, but on a smaller sample size as he's a 5.2 three-point attempt shooter throughout his career. Now, again, I like Kyle Lowry. I like the storyline of him being a Philly kid, going to Villanova. We kind of have a similar situation with Marcus Morris here of him getting the key to the city, being a guy that represents things and clearly, loving representing Philadelphia in that way. But while good stories are awesome and I love the vibes, the feel-good thing, what's even better is winning championships. And especially when looking at this Sixers team, I don't disagree that bringing in another ball handler would be helpful, but it's not as high on my list as I think many are making it out to be. That personally, I believe getting a wing with legitimate 3-and-D kind of ability that has the chance to look Jason Tatum in the eye and play him defensively in a one-on-one situation in a better way than any of the current options are, those being guys like Tobias Harris, Nico Batum, D'Anthony Melton. That's just not a lineup that I feel great about being the options. Maybe Marcus Morris or Robert Covington if you want to throw in that mix, although the news about Covington's knee does not sound particularly great as far as the timeline for when he returns. Bringing in a guy that could provide more resistance on the defensive end like that, to me, is a bigger deal. I also think that there's not enough three-point volume, period, on this team. That there's not a gunner, not a guy that is just willing to let it fly. Furkan Korkmaz being probably the closest thing to them, and there's not a world where Furkan Korkmaz is in the regular playoff rotation on this team, and they are contending for a championship. There just isn't, unfortunately. Shout out for him for still being in Philadelphia, but I just don't see it. If you can add somebody like that, and I might even go to the point where I put a backup center upgrade as a spot above that, adding an Andre Drummond or a player like that. Those all, I believe, could help this team win a championship in a better way. And one of the biggest reasons I feel that way has been the recent play of Patrick Beverley, that he's been far better on the court than I expected this entire year. That I love everything about what he brings from a gritty mentality, from the attitude, the talking trash, all the things that he does to impose himself and put his fingerprints on a game. And they're all very similar to what Kyle Lowry does. That they're both annoying, they're both pests, they're both guys that will get in opponent's face, draw charges, all these things. And when you look at the statistical differences between the two, there's not that much. Looking at the per 36 marks on the season, Patrick Beverley 42.3% from the field, Kyle Lowry 42.6% from the field. Lowry a little better three-point shooter, as Bev shooting just 31.4%, but Kyle Lowry at 38.5%, both at 10.5 points. Beverley a little bit better rebounder. He's 2 inches bigger as well. Assists about the same, turnovers about the same. As you can see, somewhat mirror image players, particularly at this point in his career. And again, I'm not making the point that Patrick Beverley is as good as Kyle Lowry in the grand scheme of their career comparison, but I'm saying at this very point, at what they each have left in the tank, I think I would argue that Pat Bev has just as much, if not more. And the reason that I say that is every moment the Sixers have been shorthanded this season, he has answered the call. That I remember him dropping 26 against the Celtics, calling ISOs. I remember that shorthanded Nuggets game where Joel Embiid did not play, Tyrese Maxey was out, and Tobias was out. Bev ending with 17 points, 11 assists, and letting the Nuggets hear about every single bucket. I love that. And for Beverley to kind of already have the inside track, I just don't like the idea of playing both Beverley and Lowry on the floor. And if you're bringing them in, I feel like you kind of have to find a way to make that work. So for me, I think Patrick Beverley is the we have Kyle Lowry at home version. I don't disagree with adding another guard, another ball handler. But for me, if you're going to do that, it should be a bit more of a swing for the fences than a veteran's minimum Kyle Lowry. That a guy like DeJounte Murray or even Alex Caruso or even Bogdan Bogdanovic, players like that can add a little bit of the ball handling with other elements to their game. That's no longer Kyle Lowry at this point in his career. And when you looked at what he did in that Heat run in the playoffs last year, I kind of like the way they used him, where instead of kind of spreading out his minutes, giving him his normal time on the court, and him having not quite the same impact as expected, they gave him short doses of go leave it all out on the floor. That for his playoff stats last year, playing a career low, well, since his rookie year low of 26 minutes per game in that one, he averaged just 9.2 points, 4.4 assists, 3.5 rebounds, and shot 37.5% from three, and the year prior, just 24.1% from beyond the arc. Now, look, Kyle Lowry could be a helpful piece. If he ends up here on a veteran's minimum, on a buyout, I won't be infuriated or mad or anything like that. But to even open up that roster spot, to me, that means the Sixers have to take a bigger swing. That if we're talking about they go make a bigger deal, if they trade a 3-for-1 deal where it's Marcus Morris, Jaden Springer, whoever else it takes to meet the number, and get a piece that is a needle mover in the way I see fit, and then Kyle Lowry comes in on a buyout, and then maybe Danny Green comes in on a buyout, I'm absolutely okay with that. But for Kyle Lowry to be like the prize of this NBA trade deadline, I think would be a massive failure on Daryl Morey's part. But I do want to hear from you guys. Let me know what your thoughts on Lowry, if it's changed at all as these talks seem to be escalating, as it's looking more and more likely that this could be the case. I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Make sure you are smashing that subscribe button to help support us over here on Sixers Digest. Drop a like on this video. I'll be talking with you next time. Peace.